Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those that responded and for everyone else too. My name is Ashley Daniels. I am a North Carolina native and community organizer. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm happy to be here with you all today. As we begin, I want to bring into the room two people. Assata Shakur, a Black woman revolutionary and freedom fighter with lineage in North Carolina. Assata escaped the U.S. carceral system and found sanctuary in Cuba, where she lived out the rest of her life. She lived until the age of 78 and died on September 25th in Havana. And Thomas Sankara. Sankara was assassinated on October 15th, 1987. Sankara was a military officer, a revolutionary, and a Pan-Africanist. It was through his presidency that the name of the former French colony was changed from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of the upright people. It feels important for me to say the names of Assata and Sankara as we begin this conversation. And I want to invite you to bring into the room, either to yourself or out loud, the names of revolutionaries who compel you to do the work that you do. You can feel free to shout them out if you want to. In late May, I had the opportunity to visit Cuba with the organization Witness for Peace. The people of Cuba have been under an illegal US blockade for over 60 years. This means they can't get enough fuel to run their trash trucks, and it's common to see piles of trash stacked on the neighborhood corners. They're unable to get medicine and sanitary supplies they need for their people. And members of our delegation brought boxes of Tylenol, bandages, and surgical supplies so that leaders could distribute them to their community members. Cuban doctors don't have access to pacemakers to keep their people's hearts beating. But Cuba is unsurpassed in consistently sending doctors and care to the most devastated parts of the world. When enslaved people in the US fled slavery, they found safety and solidarity in communities in Mexico, who fought along with them to ensure their liberation. Nelson Mandela rebuked leaders of the US and Israel and practiced solidarity with the Palestinian people, who, like the South Africans, were oppressed by apartheid. In his speech, "You Cannot Kill Ideas," a tribute to Che Guevara, Thomas Sankara stated, "We are heirs of the world's revolutions." It is with this idea that we want to hold this conversation. I will briefly introduce the panelists, and we will hear from each of them. And following the panel, there will be time to ask questions. And as we close the session, we'll have time for each of you to talk with one another about how you see your place in the revolution. So we have Vivette Jeffries-Logan, a citizen of the Okanichi Band of the Saponi Nation. Vivette is the founding director of the Tribal Health Circle and founder of Biwa Consulting. Yesenia Cuello is a founder and executive director of NC Field, or the North Carolina focusing on increasing education, leadership, and dignity. NC Field is a grassroots nonprofit serving farm workers and rural communities in Eastern North Carolina. Nate Baker is an at-large Durham City Council member, elected in 2023. Mary Saoutari, a Palestinian-American activist from Nazareth, Palestine, co-chairs the Green Party's Arab and Muslim caucus. And Mary Black is currently Climate and Environmental Justice Policy Advisor, organizer, and storyteller at Movement for Black Lives. Can we give our panelists a hand? I gave a brief introduction. We'll also invite panelists to expound on that introduction when you answer questions if you would like. So this first question is for Vivette. In retaliation for the Haitian people winning their freedom from French slaveholders, France imposed an enormous debt on the country for 122 years. Haiti made payments to France. You have shared a similar story where you were required to purchase land that was stolen from the Occaneechi band of the Saponi Nation to which you belong. Can you share how your nation came to be in stewardship of the land? Can you also share the principles that guide that stewardship?
Thank you. And I will try to remember that I'm holding the microphone because I talk with my hands, okay? How did we, literally we had to purchase the land, my ancestral homeland. Well, before I begin, one of the pieces of being an indigenous person in a colonized country is that how many of you have driver's license? And that can be used to prove your identity, mostly, correct? What I have in my hand right now is my tribal card, which proves, and my number is 018. And that tells the government that I am who I say I am. And indigenous people across Turtle Island also have to have tribal cards, right? And it's a plus and a minus at the same time. So because I carry dual citizenship, I carry citizenship as an indigenous person, as a citizen of the Occaneechi Band of Saponi Nation, but also in what is now the United States of America. So how we came to have this land, we had to purchase it. And I'm saying we had to purchase the land. We were required to purchase the land for our nation's headquarters, land where my people ran to for survival, the place where my great-great-great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, great-grandparents, and my grandfather was born and raised. You see, we had to run and hide in plain sight, running from genocidal policies, because when the colonizers came here and they met us, it wasn't about reservations. It was about extirpation. And extirpation in the dictionary says to root out and destroy, to eliminate completely, root out and eliminate the evil from these lands. They were talking about the people of the East Coast, where the boats first landed. And understanding that land is not just land, she is Hena, as I spoke about yesterday. She is our mother. How do you own your mother? How is it that we are expected to own our mother? Because we are but, I'm sorry, it's a fly. We are but one aspect of our ecosphere. I'm in relationship with the ones that swim, the ones that crawl, the standing silent nation, which are the trees and the plants, the two-legged and the four-legged. I am but a part of creation. So it's not about domination over, it is about relationship in relationship. And so the principles, and Grandmother LaDonna Harris, who started American Indians for Opportunity, and she is Comanche, wrote an article, and it's an academic article, okay? It's legitimate, because it's academic. And it's called the 4 auras. And let me pause here that I know I said aura. I do understand I can speak English. I can say R. And I'm sharing this with you because I was at an event and I was presenting about this. Yes, ma'am. You do understand it's pronounced R. Yes, I do know it's pronounced R, but where I come from is aura. She wrote an article entitled The 4 Auras, a counter-narrative to the 2 Ps, power and profit. The 4 auras are the foundation and core cultural values of indigenous communities. They are relationship, responsibility, reciprocity, and redistribution. Relationship, responsibility, reciprocity, and redistribution. Relationship comes first, and relationship not just with humans, but with every being. And I am required to think about how my very being is impacting the whole, right? My responsibility is to walk my path. And I think I might have spoken about this, that I'm clear about what my medicine is. I don't need to have all the medicines or the teachings, right? I don't need to know everything because I'm in community with people who know other things, and we work together to move forward together. Reciprocity, right? So if someone needs some money, I use this all the time, right? If I have, I'm required to give to them, to share with them. Does that mean that if I give somebody $20 that they have to give me $20 back? Nope. Because I'm in relationship, and when I am in need, I will be taken care of, right? Redistribution doesn't mean hoarding wealth either. It means sharing. How many of you have been to a birthday party? Okay. Who gets the gifts? The birthday person, right? When something is done in my honor, I do giveaways. I give away. It's not to amass wealth. So that's the quick and dirty of the 4 auras, right? Of indigeneity. It is not about amassing wealth. It's understanding I am but one part of a community, and community will take care of me, right? And not about that I need to be a rugged individual in this world. And so it is just a different way of being. Now, I want you to understand that it's a journey, because I will be 60 on November 30th, and I was raised here in this country. And so this is also an unlearning for me as well. And there are times when I have to be tapped on the shoulder by an elder and say, what are you doing, right? So I'm sharing this with you not as if I'm sitting up here as an expert. It is a walk. Decolonizing is a daily walk, and it's also humbling to understand and to let go of that we have been socialized and almost brutalized to believe that there's only one way of being at the expense of the masses, so that only a few can amass the wealth off of our backs. And so just understanding that there is a different way of being is what gives me hope.
Thank you so much. The second question is for Yesenia. Yesenia, you've referred to the farm worker communities you work with as farmers without land. And farm workers who come into our country risk greatly in pursuit of economic stability. In spite of all they're up against, can you share how farm workers still create possibilities for their families and stand in solidarity with their fellow workers?
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Yesenia y es un placer estar aquí un placer estar aquí con ustedes. Cuando describo a los trabajadores agrícolas como agricultores sin tierra, estoy nombrando una verdad de la cual no hablamos lo suficiente. Estas son las personas que hacen posible que comamos, que siembran, cuidan y cosechan la tierra. Y sin embargo, se les niega la propiedad, la estabilidad y el reconocimiento. Ellos sostienen la tierra, pero el sistema no los sostiene a ellos. Y no se trata solo de comida. La migración es parte de nuestra historia. Pero cuando hablo de migración, ¿qué significa realmente? Para mi comunidad, la migración ocurre cuando la injusticia ambiental cruza fronteras. Las personas no dejan sus hogares porque quieren. Mi madre no dejó su hogar porque quiso, sino porque tienen que hacerlo. Sequías, inundaciones, contaminación, desplazamiento económico y violencia que hacen imposible la supervivencia. La migración no es un crimen, es justicia ambiental. La amenaza bajo la que vivimos también es real. Las redadas de ICE en granjas, escuelas, caminos rurales y hospitales crean terror que calla a las personas. Es difícil exigir agua limpia, vivienda segura y protección contra la exposición a los pesticidas, cuando hablar puede significar detención o deportación para ti o alguien que tú amas. Ese miedo sostiene la injusticia, porque el derecho a vivir, trabajar y crear a tu familia en un ambiente seguro y saludable es insignificante cuando tu propia existencia es criminalizada. A principios de este año, una niña de 11 años una niña de 11 años llamada Jocelyn Rojo Carranza se suicidó en Texas. Su madre dijo que había sido acosada en la escuela. Sus compañeros le decían que ICE iba a llevarse a sus padres. Imagina por un momento tener 11 años y cargar con ese tipo de miedo. Miedo a que las personas que más amas y que confías puedan desaparecer. Miedo que algo tan ordinario como ir a la escuela pueda destruir a tu familia. Incluso, sin entrar, poder convertir lugares como escuelas, clínicas y parques en espacios de ansiedad y vigilancia. Les enseña a los niños a mirar por encima del hombro antes de siquiera poder aprender multiplicación. Si nos decimos, esta es solo una familia, esto no nos afecta a todos, entonces hemos comprado la narrativa falsa. Cuando la verdad es que si se niega el debido proceso a una persona, se le niega a todos. Si aceptamos que algunas personas pueden vivir sin derechos, entonces ninguno de nosotros está verdaderamente protegido. ICE no solo ataca a los inmigrantes, ataca nuestra humanidad colectiva, la misma idea de justicia y comunidad. Atacan la confianza que es el pegamento que nos mantiene unidos. Rania lo dijo hoy temprano. Lo que estamos viendo hoy es el secuestro de personas. Hoy nuestros hijos son etiquetados como amenaza para la seguridad nacional. No podemos seguir endulciendo la realidad. Las personas que ayer eran esenciales hoy son categorizadas como criminales, ladrones del sueño americano. Redadas de la Oficina de Migración de ICE en granjas y caminos rurales, en las escuelas de nuestros hijos y en nuestros hospitales. Lo que antes era un lugar seguro, ahora es solo otro posible punto de control. Salimos a la calle con nuestros documentos en una mano y las manos de nuestros hijos en la otra. independientemente de nuestro estatus legal o ciudadanía. Si somos personas de color, todos deberíamos mirar por encima de nuestros hombros. Cuando la gente es secuestrada mientras duerme, no hay derechos. Solo podemos confiar en redes de ayuda mutua y en pequeños bolsillos de confianza, como el vecino que me llama después de una tormenta para asegurarse que yo y mi familia estamos bien. José Arturo González Mendoza, un trabajador agrícola temporal de solamente 30 años, murió en el trabajo de Barnes Farming en el año 2023 durante un calor extremo. El Departamento de Trabajo de Carolina del Norte encontró que las condiciones en la granja eran perjudiciales para los trabajadores, como la falta de descanso adecuado de calor. Barnes Farming Corporación fue inicialmente multada con más de $187,000 en el año 2024. Sin embargo, la multa se redujo a un acuerdo este año a $3,750. Los mismos sistemas que explotan la mano de obra son los que contaminan la tierra y se benefician al mantenernos en silencio y con miedo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Yesenia. Our third question is for Nate. As a city councilman, you engage in votes about bus fare, workplace safety, and affordable housing. How is something like housing affordability in Durham linked to colonialization in this country and elsewhere?
When we think about Gaza, when we think about Cuba, when we think about immigration, when we think about gentrification and colonialization and sprawl, why is it that when we look at city councils across our state and across our country, that the people who take positions on one are so consistent in the other? Why is it that council members and leaders who are fighting back against sprawl and gentrification are the same people who are willing to raise their voices on Gaza, on Cuba, and on all of these other issues of international importance? We're sitting here in this room today in this country that is spiraling quickly toward fascism under the developer-in-chief. We can't talk about these issues. We can't just talk about class warfare as it relates to labor. We can't just talk about class warfare as it relates to many other issues. We have to think about class warfare as well under the context and within the context of housing and of land and of the R word, land under capitalism, which is real estate. So, we need to think about housing because it is inherently tied to land. Never think about housing without thinking about land and the land that it sits on. Never think about housing without thinking about the people who live or don't live in that housing. In this country, it's not just to house people, it's an investment. I'm a Durham City Council member, and my mind has been on this council race that's happening right now and the potential switch in coalition majorities on the council and how that might affect the way that we change the way that we govern our own city. But we can't think about the way we're going to govern our city without thinking about the way that we have governed our city and the way that we've governed our city in the context of a capitalist society. I want to talk about sprawl and gentrification. Two things that are a little bit different, but that are inherently tied together. Since 2017, in the city of Durham, we have sprawled half the area of Manhattan outward. Sprawl, indigenous land stolen by European colonizers, passed down from generation to generation, and sold for enormous profit to the biggest home builders in the nation, the most profitable home builders in the nation, Pulte Group, Lennar Homes, Mungo Homes, these things have names, with the biggest investors on the planet, who are Vanguard, who are BlackRock. These are the entities that are shaping the world that we live in, the world where housing is, the world where we navigate from place to place, where we take our kids to school. They own the means not only of production, but the means of producing the built environment, the means of eliminating the natural environment and the world that we live in and navigate in on a daily basis. What percentage of the global wealth is in real estate? 68%. 68% of the global wealth in this modern era that we're in, with the greatest level of inequality that this world has ever seen, with the greatest level of power that the ruling class is exerting over everyone else, now tied directly to our pockets and our phones through AI and all other means of technology to influence the way that we think about the way that the world works, our own realities that we live in. We deserve the right to shape the world that we live in, not just have them shape the world that we live in. That applies not just in New York City or in LA, it applies right here in Whitakers, it applies in Durham, and it applies in every single one of the communities that you all live, work, and spend time in. Zoning. It's a quirky tool, it's a legal tool, it's one that is based in police powers delegated to the states according to the Constitution and upheld by the Supreme Courts. It's a tool that has been misused throughout human history. And as a result, the ruling class wants to eliminate it, wants to use the language of social justice and economic justice to trick us into thinking that it's a tool that we should no longer have. Zoning, this boring sounding word, we hear about zoning board meetings, board of adjustment, planning commissions, but it's one of these tools that we have at our disposal. We don't own the means of producing our city, but we own the DNA that shapes it. We need, on the left, we need as working class members of our communities to think and know and understand zoning. YIMBYs, neoliberals, abundance. These are the terms that are being weaponized to move progressives and members, progressive members and liberals, members of the professional managerial class in this country, to eliminate the tools and, more importantly, to disempower us into believing that collectively we can't radically alter the world that we live in. But we're not going to win this war with understanding zoning alone. The same tools apply in every other field of this country. We need to work together in solidarity. Tenant unions, labor unions, these are going to be the tools that we're going to use to win the world that we want. And I'll just end with, Che Guevara once said that we are all lucky. We Americans are lucky because we live in the belly of the beast. This is where the biggest ruling class lives in this world, and we have the power to change that right here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. The next question is for May. May, can you share with us how solidarity with the Palestinian people is tied to the liberation of the people who live in the U.S.?
Thank you for the question. But first, let me share with you some news from Gaza. Came yesterday. So yesterday afternoon, Israeli army targeted a bus in the Zaytun neighborhood in Gaza, killing all of the following. Muhammad Abu Shaban, 5 years old. Ibrahim Ihab Abu Shaban, 6 years old. Anas Sufyan Shaban, 8 years old. Karam Sufyan Shaban, 10 years old. Jumana Ihab Shaban, 10 years old. Nasma Sufyan Shaban, 12 years old. Nasir Ihab Abu Shaban, 13 years old. And 3 women, Randa, Samar, and Sufyan. And 1 man was Ihab, all of them killed. Yes, our liberation in the US as people resisting oppression, racism, and fascism is tied with the liberation of Palestinians and all of occupied Palestine. Why do I say that? First, let me introduce myself. I'm a Palestinian, a daughter of Palestinian parents, and a wife to a wonderful Palestinian husband, Mark Alborno, who is also from Gaza. We are indigenous people to the land of Palestine. My family traces our roots back to our villages and for hundreds of years. And yet, the vast majority of us, I would say 90% of Palestinians are refugees by force, denied the right to go home, to go back to our cities and villages, solely because we are Palestinian, solely because we're not Jews. What do we call this? Settler colonialism, rooted in racism and supremacy. Does this sound familiar? It should. Look at the theft of this land from the indigenous First Nation communities and look at the ongoing theft of my land and indigenous Palestinian by the pop-up entity called Israel. For both our people, the Palestinians and the First Nation communities on Torah Island, the settlers, the terrorists, massacred entire communities, committed kidnapped and execution, stole our children and banned our teachings, used systematic rape as a weapon of a genocide, poisoned our wells, and imposed famine and starvation on our families, and celebrated and upheld these atrocities while considering us savages and terrorists. For both, a friend of mine, and friend of a lot of people here, Rani Al-Masri, recently she went through the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and she read this statement on the wall. The governor of Mississippi, James Vardaman, said in 1907, if necessary, every Negro in this state will be lynched. It reminded her of the numerous statements coming from Israel for more than 100 years. The founder of modern Zionism, Theodore Herzl, said in 1996, supposing we were obliged to a clear country of wild beasts, referring to the indigenous Palestinians, we would organize large and active hunting party, drive the animals together, and throw melanite bomb into their midst. Yusuf Witz, director Jewish National Fund Land Settlement Committee, said in 1932, the only solution is a land of Israel without Arabs. Not one village must be left, not one tribe. David Ben-Gurion, first Prime Minister of Israel, said, we must expel Arabs and take their places. We shall abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. The first organized military force of systematically displaced Palestinian farmers and other was in 1909 by European Zionists. Every single Israeli prime president and Zionist leader has voiced clear intent to erase the Palestinian people from our lands, either by forced expulsion, or military violence, more than 100 years of genocidal intent against my people. The horrors in Palestine are allowed because of the nation of indigenous savages has been allowed to flourish in settler narrative for centuries. We're supposed to believe the settler is a defender and the native is a terrorist who resists. And today, President Trump planned for Gaza look like a Native American reservation, genocide with all the tools, the clearance, famine. Epidemic and now reservation for the survivor is so structural to Western identity. It's the same settler colonialism and genocide, but with the modern technologies to kill and surveil, it is unlike anything we have ever seen before. Recently, Israel's finance minister, Smotrich, and I quote, "International law does not apply to Jews. The difference between the chosen people and the others," I'm sure we all agree, there's no master race. There are no chosen people of God. We are all children of God. Our liberation are linked because of the settler colonial supremacy foundation. The US and the Israel share colonial logic, land theft, racial hierarchy, and displacement of indigenous people. The Trail of Tears, 1838, an ongoing indigenous depression. Echo Israel's Nakba, 1948, and continuing ethnic cleansing. US settler colonialism never ended. It evolved into mass. Environmental extraction and systemic racism. Zionism mirrors the ideology, the belief in higher grade race, entitled to take the land of others, and every Zionist leader has stated. Both systems rely on viewing some lives as expendable or inferior. Palestinians, Black people, indigenous nations, migrants, and the poor. Liberation in either place requires dismantling racism, capitalism, and militarism. Everywhere they exist. Liberation in every place, again, requires those very important things to maintain both oppressions against people here in the Torah Island and occupied Palestine. A system of manufactured concept is required, and dissent has to be surpassed. The weapon industry, politician and media work together, fabricated wars and enemies to generate profile here. And many families, among so many others, pay the ultimate price. Both President Biden and Trump announced the delivery of more than 30 billion of weapons to Israel. In addition to that, more than 30 billion is in weapons that Trump administration notified Congress last month and used 6.5 billion weapons transferred to Israel. 36 billions of weapons in 24 months. Remember, FEMA had announced a 9 billion shortfall for Hurricane Helen. The US has delivered shipment of weapons to Israel every 15 hours of the past 22 months, equal 1,014 weapons delivery, from October 23rd to July 25th. Meanwhile, the past 24 Israel dropped more than 200,000 tons of bombs on Gaza, an area of size of Raleigh. That equivalent to more than 13 Hiroshima automatic bombs. And throughout it all, under both Biden and Trump administration, the US voted UN Security Resolution calling for a ceasefire 6 times. The result in Gaza alone between 66,000 to 860,000. Yes, 860,000. In the first year, the US weapon killed 17,000 children. Israel has killed more than 1 child every hour since October 23rd. More than 400 buses of children. And the genocide against Palestine and Gaza continues. The genocide has not stopped. The starvation has not stopped. The killing has not stopped. And the ethnic cleansing against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank has been forcibly removed 42,000 from their homes and their villages. And it's the largest removal of our indigenous people since the occupation of the West Bank in 1967. Our liberation is also linked to use silence of dissent. Thank you so much. My time is up. Thank you for bearing with me. This is my first panel.
Thank you, May. This question is for Mary. You are often advocating for accessible and dignified housing, meaningful support for marginalized communities, and environmental stewardship. Can you talk with us about how justice in each of these issues is interdependent?
Yeah, this is a beautiful question. I do spend a lot of my time talking about the intersection of those 3 things. I really see it as a conversation between urban development and environmental sustainability, but really the way that the interplay of how we live, work, and play within the ecosystem that we are largely connected to. This question really made me think of the Gwendolyn Brooks poem, and she has a quote in it that says, "We are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's magnitude and bond." For me, it's really an understanding of how I am because we are, and we are because I am. Oftentimes in the urban development and environmental development spaces, the interplay of these 2 things are seen as unassociated and not relevant to each other in a lot of ways. But we know that there are things like climate gentrification that are sparking the displacement of people. And if you don't know what climate gentrification is, it's basically displacement in communities largely of working class or of color that have been in these environmentally sensitive areas. When there are climate disasters that happen, they are displaced from their communities. And then what happens as a result is that these real estate developers come in and they buy the land at a loss, and then they come in and they put high-end luxury developments, and people are further displaced from their communities, their homes, their lands, their ancestral understandings. We know that there are things like green gentrification, and that's actually when cities are preparing for the climate crisis, putting in these investments for, say, flooding or transportation, and these investments into these communities that have largely been ignored, left on the fringes of our society, are now faced with rising property taxes and things that are disrupting the fabric and the community and the culture that has made them that neighborhood for so long. We see it in places like Miami and Little Haiti, where for a long time, the neighborhood wasn't seen as a place where people of wealth and status wanted to be, but because it's in higher grounds, the areas that were near the beaches that are being impacted by these storms that we're seeing in flooding, people are now moving to Little Haiti and displacing the people that have been there. You see it even here I was on Raleigh City Council for a couple of years, and you see it there in Raleigh with the implementation of things like the bus rapid transit, where we're making these investments into transportation, and transportation is good for the climate, but we're putting these investments and the zonings that come in association to high-cost developments that are subsidizing the ability to have these transportations on the backs of Black communities and working-class communities that, don't get to see the investments long-term into the community that they've been a part of. Sorry, I'm a little bit narrow-spicy, so these bugs have been bothering me. We understand that, your zip code is more likely to determine your health outcomes any more than your actual genetic or social makeup. It's really determined in the racial factors that go into that and the economic factors that tie into that. So there's a lot of interconnectedness that ties into these understandings that aren't often respected or understood or heard. But for me, I really see housing justice, climate and environmental justice, and social justice are all built on the understanding of self-determination of people, people at the decision table, community-centered in the decision-making process, and oftentimes, when we are in these spaces making these decisions, we're thinking about maybe the next 10 years or the next 30 years. Everybody has been thinking about 2050, but we're at the point now where we need to be thinking about the next 7 generations and how the things we are developing, the land we are using, and how we are moving through the world will interplay with reality that people who are going to be coming from us 7 generations from now are going to inherit. I think there's a growing fight. I missed the data center call yesterday, or the panel yesterday, but there's a real reality around how the implementation and the mass production of these spaces for the use of technology and this progress and this idea that we're progressing as humanity is really setting so many communities that have already been historically, economically, and environmentally impacted on a direction that continues to result in their subjugation, from the water usage to the energy uses that is passed off as to utilities to our different people to then have to deal with, to the reality of the pollution and the disruption that happens in those communities that also sparks property value increases in areas that are largely rural that then have to deal with the realities of that. So that's really the interconnectedness of how all of these things come together. But really the essence is that we need to be thinking about how we're working together and thinking for the next 7 generations. And every decision that we're making, from land use to environment to social justice, and how we interact with each other.
Can we give our panelists another hand, please? I want to lift up some wisdom that each person has shared. Vivette reminded us that, Earth is our mother, and how can you own your mother? And that decolonizing is a daily walk. Yesenia shared that migration is not a crime, and also shared about the daily challenges that people face when speaking up might mean detention or deportation for someone you love. Nate shared with us that we can't talk about housing without talking about land, and that 68% of global wealth is in real estate. May lifted up that 90% of Palestinians are refugees by force. And we appreciate the link between the Trail of Tears and the Nakba. And then May lifted up that, remind us, I am because we are, and we are because I am. And that we need to be thinking and planning for the next 7 generations ahead. I want to ask in the next question, and we can start with you, Mary. Please share one act of solidarity that you want to invite the people in this room into. And we can just go down the line.
I actually didn't have an answer for this one, so I'm just gonna riff. I think my act of solidarity recently has been really reflecting on the special interests, talents, and gifts, and how I show up in the world in relation to what is happening in the world around me, and how I'm utilizing that expertise, as I'm calling it, even though it's not something that you learn in the classroom, it's something that is either gifted from you, from the Almighty, or through the interactions and the connections that you make in this lifetime. But really thinking about how those gifts and those talents lend themselves to advocating, shifting, and being a part of this new world that we are building together and collectively as it's all falling apart. And I missed the fireside chat yesterday, but I heard it was about, like, a lot of it was about we're comfortable with the destruction of what our current world system is. And I am too, but what are we building in this moment? If we're revolutionaries, how are we lending ourselves to being a part of this revolution and building as things are burning? And so that would be my act of solidarity that I would tell y'all to be a part of, that reflection and that praxis and that journey.
We're down pretty bad on the left in this country. Working class people, we're all down pretty bad. How many of you have heard the term or the phrase, when we fight, we win? When we fight, I'm kind of a pessimist. I'm not sure if that's true, but what I do know is if we don't fight, we lose. We have no other choice but to fight. And I believe that to fight in this country, a country that is so full of problems, that we need to bring people into our coalitions. We need to build allies among people that we're not always comfortable with. So please write this down. My one act of solidarity, all of this work is so tiring, and we have so much work to do in our day-to-day lives. The one thing that I will suggest is in the next 2 months, this is gonna be very specific, in the next 2 months, invite over some friends to have dinner at your home and bring in one person that you wouldn't ordinarily bring in and have a normal, good evening and enjoy yourselves. But bring in one other person who you might not ordinarily invite to your home. That's the one act of solidarity that I'm gonna call on folks in this room to do. Thanks.
Nate, you said allies, right? I don't believe in allies. I believe in accomplices. Because I need you to be willing to go to jail with me. All right, ally is not weighty enough for me, because allyship, it's like, we gotta put that down and pick up the heavy artillery right now, okay? I'm gonna go back to relationships. So what I tell when I'm in the halls of all of these institutions, right, and four-year universities, and sitting with people who have a lot of alphabets behind their name, and I'm not belittling that. What I tell them is, if you're coming into my community, put that in your back pocket, because we want to know who are you, or we say who you be before the titles. It is about building relationships, not about what your title is or what you can do. It's who's your people? Who are you as a human being? Because we are operating in a system that values us by what our titles are, how much money we have. It is about understanding, again, going back to, I don't need to know how to do everything because I'm in community with people who know more than I do, but that doesn't lessen me. So understanding how we move together, and not just about what our titles are, how much money we have, or where we come from. Put it in your pocket and show up. Show up for dinner. Show up to mow the grass. Show up and show up and show up. And in turn, when you're in need, you will be taken care of as well.
Yes, Rania, she passed out, this paper to everybody here. The words matter, decolonizing language. And it's very important to stay informed. And you would have the time to read it now or later. I would say a couple of things over there, like framing it is as a conflict between two sides or as an ongoing conflict of thousands of years. The two sides are an occupier and the occupied. Israel is a settler colonial regime enforcing military occupation, apartheid, and systemic discrimination against the Palestinians for more than 77 years. This European Zionist settler colonialism project in Palestine, deeply rooted European colonialism, began in the 19th century. Our grandparents remember a united Palestine. Claiming it's a religious conflict, this is about land, human rights, and self-determination, not religious. Represented Judaism as Zionism. Zionism is a political ideology, not a religion or nationality, and considered by thousands of rabbis to be an affront to Judaism itself. Boycott the North Carolina bonds. Also, like you have the other paper, Rania, my dear Rania, thank you so much. Divest from oppression, invest in our communities, a coalition including Jewish Voice for Peace, Triangle, North Carolina, Pali Youth in North Carolina, and Muslims for Social Justice, Durham Educator for Abolition and Liberation, Jewish Voice for Peace, Charlotte, and employees of the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is invested in a genocide. Join us demanding that North Carolina State Treasurer Brad Briner divest from poor returning Israel government bond investments and invest in our communities. And please go to breakthebondsnorthcarolina.org and sign the petition over there. Thank you so much.
¿Solamente una, Ashley? Dije solamente una idea. No tengo una, les voy a dar una lista. La razón por la cual proveo una lista es porque no soy fanática de excusas. Así, cuando se trata de la verdadera solidaridad, no es solo palabras. Así que en las palabras del señor Devon Hall, no es lo que digo, es lo que hago. Se ve al compartir una comida, un viaje al mercado o a un evento de distribución de alimentos. Se ve al defender a alguien que está siendo acosado cuando ves que ocurre discriminación. Es el reconocimiento de que más para un grupo no significa menos para otro. Es enviar un mensaje rápido a los vecinos si hay un chequeo cerca de la escuela para evitar ser afectados. Se ve al traducir un volante o ayudar a alguien a hacer una cita médica. Se ve al llevar agua fría a los campos en un día caluroso o al ofrecer un viaje a la iglesia cuando alguien no tiene cómo llegar. Se ve al asistir a reuniones comunitarias, incluso cuando se supone que no hay nada para ti, pero porque sabemos que afecta a nuestros vecinos y por lo tanto nos afecta a nosotros. Es usar tu voz o tu privilegio para hablar cuando otros no pueden hacerlo de manera segura. Es invitar voces que no siempre se parecen a las nuestras a los espacios de toma de decisiones y escuchar para entender. He escuchado decir ayer y hoy, la solidaridad no es caridad, es cuidado, es coraje, es elegirnos unos a otros una y otra vez. La responsabilidad moral frente a la injusticia exige acción. Como nos recuerda la señora Isabel Wilkerson, no actuar es actuar y no hablar es hablar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you to each of you. If y'all want to give them another hand. All right, and I am giving, you can't hear it, but I am giving a hand to each of you as well for staying here and being committed to this space and being committed to being together and listening. And if you have any questions for any of the panelists at this time, we will take, I think, about 15 minutes to take questions. Okay, I see Kim back here.
I think this question of solidarity with the global community is very important. What I'm trying to say is that what is not pointed out by people is that this 21st century started out with an earth-shaking movement. And the movement is that US imperialism is no longer the #1 hegemony, and that the rest of the world is rising up. And the reason why I'm saying this is that US imperialism and the Western imperialism has shown us that brutality has no bottom line. And we saw that in Gaza. And it's no longer sustainable, and the rest of the world is rising up against that. You saw all those demonstrations that was going on all over the world, okay? So given that, what I'm just saying is that the principal contradiction for us right now is between US imperialism and hegemonism versus the US working class and the global majority. So we are already in a war. We are in an economic war with tariffs and everything else that's coming back to us as inflation, right, as deindustrialization, and as bankruptcy. You all know, you all saw with the US farmers are already bankrupt. Why? Because their biggest market stopped wanting their crops. So whatever they have grown is no longer saleable. So all their soybeans, their wheat, everything goes down the drain. So it's coming back to us, this so-called tariffs war. We're already in a war. And what I'm saying is that for the NCEJN, after 27 years of doing the same thing, it's time to change. For us, we have to go about looking for systems change. We need state power. It's not a question anymore about mutual trust and helping each other out. We need state power, all right? It's the only way we're going to go forward and change significantly. And I'm saying is that it's good to talk about helping each other. It's a fine line between helping each other. But unless we have state power, they will crush us. Okay, so take that in mind as our target. So no matter what we're doing, yeah, we help each other, we love each other, we do everything, but our main target is state power and change the system.
I'm going to use the power of the microphone. Kim, thank you. That is one of our objectives. That we are hoping, and I hope that I can speak for all of us at NCEJN, that we are hoping through organizing, through the power of political education, through the power of information through research, that we can develop the collective power that is needed to actually no longer be influencing people in position, but actually be placing the people we want in position. It breaks my heart as a citizen of Raleigh that we lost the most progressive member of the Raleigh City Council, Mary Black, because she stood in solidarity with us on issues of justice, and therefore the Democratic Party decided to remove her and replace her with a developer lover. So we need exactly what you're saying, and to have that, and to not shy away from saying, we want to be the power, because we have the vision, we have the values to actually be the power. So how do we build that within us? And that is one of the reasons that we've been distributing so much paper. Not because we have shares in Weyerhaeuser. We do not have shares in Weyerhaeuser. But we've been distributing all these papers to you, asking you questions so that you can tell us what you think, what you need, so that we can then go back at NCEJN and figure out, okay, what are the supporting systems that we can build together so that we can be at that stage, that our collective power becomes that strong. We are nowhere near where we need to be. Ashada Shakur taught us that we need to have discipline and militancy, because this is a serious fight. A fight for clean water and clean air is no joke. It is a serious fight that expands beyond a 9-to-5, beyond a grant, and beyond an election cycle. And I believe every one of us here is committed to the seriousness of that fight. At the same time, Emma Goldman reminded us very much that we got to dance at the revolution. So when I say seriousness, I don't mean depression, I mean seriousness with mischief. So forgive me for taking over the mic to say that, but yes, we're with you, Kim. Other questions? I know we have a question here, because you raised your hand.
You're a little psychic. Thank you all for everything that you've talked about. Nate, I wanna ask you, as someone who's in a position and understands the word zoning better, what does organizing, so for our room, what does organizing and plugging into actually driving at like a change in zoning laws look like?
Yeah, thank you for that question. First, I also just want to address the first statement here and express complete agreement that the end of what we need is power over the state and power over the government. Of course, as Vladimir Lenin pointed out, the owners of the means of production are the ones who have control over the state. And so on the road to that, we need to own the means of production, grow our ownership in the means of production through things like cooperatives, but also eventually get to the point where move toward a revolution. But in the meantime, poor people can't wait. The environment can't wait. So we need to do all of the work that it takes to improve working people's lives on the road to that end. And coming back to your question about zoning and how to organize around zoning, zoning is quirky, and it's the law. It's just the law. You know, we can talk about this tool within zoning or that tool within zoning, and you oftentimes see the YIMBYs and the developers and the neoliberals talk about how this tool is good or this tool is bad, but they're all just tools. What we need to do is organize, is change our mentality to believe that we own the right to be able to shape the world that we live in collectively. Every day that we don't have a right to housing is a right denied to us. Every day that we don't have a right to healthcare is a right denied to us. And every day that we don't have a right to our own cities is a right denied to us. We need to understand that it is our power to be able to shape the world around us. And zoning is the tool or the collection of tools that helps get us there. But most importantly, we need to shape the world around us, and we can do that through the planning process, through urban planning and community planning, through coming together in our neighborhoods, through our workplaces, through our places of organizing, and our churches and our nonprofit groups. We can all come together and say, hey, we deserve to be able to shape things a little and make things a little bit differently. When you walk through the space that you live in and operate in on a daily basis, are we happy with that, or can we imagine something differently, and can we think about how to actually get to that new destination? Where are we today? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? And zoning is one of the tools to get us there. So we want to understand it, but it is not the end-all, be-all. We need to understand it, but it's not everything. Adam, yeah.
I also had a response to that.
Kim, yeah, go ahead.
cut the mic off. He was like, I'm done, mic drop. One of the things that I was thinking, because you said potential tools for really engaging community in the zoning stuff, I've worked with groups who were in Flint, and one of the things that they used was just this process of collectively working through these agendas and these documents and creating these oversight committees that had nothing to do with the government. They were just like independent community groups that came together to look at what's happening with zoning and pay attention to those things, because a lot of these things that are happening with, housing gentrification, climate, budget, participatory stuff, all is happening at a local level, and people aren't engaged at that level. And so similar to what Nate is saying, like seeing our understanding of like taking those things back is also engaging in those things in a way that's really collective and comprehensive. And obviously they've had varied success over time working in Flint doing this, but it was a process that began with like people just looking at where the money is going and why it wasn't going to particular things. So I think that could be a really thoughtful avenue of engaging people at the local level, which is really what we need right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this panel, and especially the connection to zoning and connection to land, and the shout out to the revolution of the Haitian people. I'm a Haitian New Yorker. And in New York City, the relationship between housing and land is not at all clear. So, I grew up in a giant apartment complex, as in 99% of other New Yorkers. We do not have a connection to a land, yet I would consider myself a native New Yorker, like generationally, as many first-generation people have come to New York City. We're not in New York City, so we don't need to talk about that right now. But I think I would be interested to hear a number of your takes on this relationship to power over land when you do not have land ownership, and what that has looked like for indigenous people, but what has looked like even for renters on all different scales here, because that came up in some conversations yesterday about, okay, I can advocate for this stuff, cool, but I'm a renter, and probably more than 50% of this room is probably renters. So what would you say in taking back power for those of us that have emotional community, historical ties to our land, quote, but like that, what even that land is really ambiguous and really varies for a lot of us. Thank you.
I would begin again with imagining that you do have power, imagining that you do have the power to shape that land, and that land that was historically stolen and taken away, and that is now in the hands of people who, through their land, have wealth themselves. Zoning is something that it compels the most powerful and profitable industry on the planet to the table. So it forces them to negotiate. And as the other side, they know that it's negotiation. They know it's about deal making. They write books called The Art of the Deal, right? They want our side to think that we always have to take the first deal on the table, or that we can't even participate in the deal making process, that we don't belong at the table. And it's called land rights, right? They want property rights. They want you to believe, they want you to be disempowered, so disempowered that you don't even spend time imagining an alternative. So I do think that beginning with your own imagination, your own collective imagination for what it can and should be is important. You wake up in the morning and you plan out your day. You think about the next generation, you plan that out. So I think that that's important. But there are very real, tangible, legal tools that are available to empower tenants and to empower people, and the development process and the landlord process. Landlords talk about we're housing providers, but they provide housing the way that scalpers provide tickets. They don't actually provide anything. They hold on and they hoard, and then they extract your wealth that you earn. It's passive income for them. And you can go on Instagram, right, and it's just in your face that people talk about retiring at the age of 30 because of the investments that they've made. So on the road to the revolution, where we take the land back for working class people, we do have tools that are available to us. And it's important to remember that while I do believe our greatest hope in the short term is, one of our hopes in the short term is the good people in the Democratic Party, I do think that it's important to remember that, for example, one of our greatest powers over landlords in this country, which is rent control, was eliminated by the Democratic Party in 1987, written and spearheaded by the Democratic Party in 1987, and by Democratic parties in states across the country.
I just want to say we have time for about one other question, because we're wanting to leave space for you all to connect with each other as well.
I don't want to talk.
Can you hear me? Yep. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. I couldn't help it watching the entire day going through, reflecting actually each panel, each question. What I have noticed that we're running like a chicken with her head cut off, not knowing where we're going. Because we're being told that the Democratic Party is doing this for us, the Republican Party is doing that for us. By the way, I am the treasurer for the Green Party US, and almost each presentation, one of them, it had actually people, planet, not profit, that is actually the platform for the Green Party. And what seems to me, what I finally actually figured out right now, that we are all well-educated, looking for the right solution. We are not outnumbered, by the way, but we're out-organized, like Malcolm X said that in 1964, I think. So what we really need to do is to drop these two, Democrat or Republican, because, by the way, I heard you saying, I don't want you not to vote, I want you to vote. But the Republican Party just in May or April or May passed a new resolution prohibit the ranked choice voting that allow you to pick the right choice for you. So either party, they are really doing everything possible to take the power from you as the people. And I really would love to have all this energy around here to join the Green Party, not only the North Carolina Green Party, the national one as well, because it is the only party that actually cannot be bought. It is only funded by people like you. They don't accept PAC monies or corporate money. So they cannot be influenced. They only serve the people because it is funded by the people for the people. So please, I really would love for everyone here to join, because we need you. Your community needs you. You're here because of this reason. Maybe I'm here to maybe open the door for you and remind you, you do have the option. And let's stop thinking that those other duopoly that has done nothing for us other than actually used us and abused us. Thank you.
I do have a question that I wanted to ask, and my question is, Sister Kim spoke a minute ago about power, and Representative Alma Adams, she would say, you don't ask for power, you take it. And when you take it, you use it. To take power will require sacrifices. So I'm wondering if you could each speak to the sacrifices you earnestly think are going to be necessary to change these conditions. Pretend like there is a tower of silence around this room. Like, from your heart, what are the sacrifices you earnestly think that we are going to need to make to actually turn this thing around?
So this is the last question because we need space for folks to talk to each other. Would request that the panelists be concise in the responses.
Be concise. I think that's a great way to put that. I think for me, we have to understand that we live in the imperial core. And although we are in different ways are an oppressed people, we live inside the imperial core, and I think there are certain sensibilities and comfortabilities that we have gotten used to and grown to expect living here that we're going to have to be uncomfortable with the disruption of. Because if we're talking about revolution, if we're talking about taking power and using that power, then it's like the reality that we have to be uncomfortable with the things that we have made ourselves comfortable with over time. And part of it is going to be like the access, the quickness, the expectation that we are deserving of certain things because of the way that we work or the way that how we governed ourselves or the education that we may have. Those things I think are going to start to crumble. And yeah, just like getting over those American sensibilities of like the expectation that I deserve these things because of X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Two things. I think one, getting rid of some comforts in daily life, because I think what will be necessary is organizing, and organizing is personal time. So I think using personal time that you would be using toward your daily comforts toward organizing is going to be one thing. And two, people are going to have to get locked up, so that is going to have to happen.
For me is, I would say, sacrifice. There's a lot of things that we started boycotting, and there's apps for that you can go by, and you think it's a very simple thing, but trust me, when you have little kids, when you go to a store and they start asking you, I want that and I want that, and I was like, oh, no, like that's Israeli product. As Nate mentioned, sacrificing a lot of our personal time. We haven't got any vacation for 2 years. Trying to raise our voices, and for the ones who can't speak. I would say divest as well, very important. Stay informed, and that's one of the biggest things for me. Like, I have to watch every day what's going on. Like, I would know, like, you know, if there is something happen in different, you know, city over here, or it's like 10 miles away or 100 miles away. Like, I keep, like, thinking, like, you know, oppressed people and people in need and people who need to raise their voices, I have to always keep thinking of them and raise, you know, our voices for them. Thank you.
Primeramente, muy buena pregunta acerca de lo que viene siendo los sacrificios, porque sabemos que los sacrificios van a ser requeridos para el cambio que estamos queriendo ver. Yo en mis notas escribí, voy a tratar de decirlo un poquito en corto, yo escribí el poder y puse, ¿cómo se dice? Question mark a un lado, de que es una pregunta acerca de qué viene siendo el poder, quién tiene el poder, a quién le estamos dando nuestro poder. Y la pregunta de vez en cuando se cambia entre dos grupos en términos de, ok, tú estás correcto y tú estás en lo incorrecto. Pero algo que nos quiero recordar, que fue algo que yo, haciendo este trabajo y abogando desde joven, que siempre dijimos o decíamos, es que no hay poder como el poder de las personas, porque el poder de las personas no para. Así que quiero recordarnos uno al otro que nosotros como personas tenemos poder, pero igual como tenemos poder, tenemos la opción de poder decidir a quién le estamos dando nuestro poder. Siento que cuando estamos hablando acerca de poder también es súper importante cuando estamos hablando de sacrificios, especialmente para una comunidad que de vez en cuando ha sido silenciada, es hablar con la verdad frente a ese mismo poder. Y como he hablado, también no es solamente de cómo podemos obtener ese poder, sino que cómo queremos nosotros hacer poder diferente y tener el poder de poder influenciar cómo se usa ese poder. Y la cosa es que de vez en cuando esto me trae a muchas conversaciones que he tenido acerca de no solamente cómo podemos mantener la paz. ¿Verdad? Siento que porque nosotros de vez en cuando hemos tratado de mantener la paz, no hemos creado la paz que sabemos que nuestras comunidades necesitan. Y también uno también debería de reconocer igual que no se trata de quién está en lo correcto y quién está en lo incorrecto, porque estando correcto no siempre crea esa paz. O solamente era algo que quería compartir con ustedes, porque para nosotros poder en términos de sacrificio sí se trata de continuar de levantar nuestras voces, continuar de compartir nuestras historias, porque el trabajo que nosotros hacemos sí se trata de cambiar mentes y corazones. Muchísimas gracias.
So what I am giving up, and I'm doing this now, is giving up the fallacy of rugged individualism and leaning into community. And I'm hard-headed and I'm independent, but that comes from a history, right? And the way that I think about, and I just had this conversation at my job, right? People were talking about the far left and the far, and I'm like, I'm neither one. Because in this country, you got Democrats and Republicans, and the way that we talk about it is they're two wings of the same damn bird, right? It's time to put the bird down, right? And actually, the things that some of my colleagues were talking about, what I ended with was, I'm a citizen of a sovereign nation, but our sovereignty was granted to us by the very colonizers that tried to annihilate us, which also means that they can take away my people's sovereignty. They can take away indigenous sovereignty at any point. And so why would I want to engage in a system that was created and I was not even supposed to be here? So there is a different way of being. But if we keep following down the same path of that, if we believe that the Democrats are going to get us out of this shit, then we're going to repeat the same thing that my mother and my grandmother and my grandfather and my grandmother fought for. And I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be feeling like my mother felt in 1964. I shouldn't be feeling like my grandfather felt. Because in North Carolina, until 1958, with 12 people on the street, an indigenous person could be shot dead with no retribution. And if I sound like I'm angry, I am pissed off, because I'm fitting to be 60, and yes, I said fitting to be 60, and I'm having to face some of the same things that my grandparents faced. And so it is like there's got to be something else other than the two. And how are we beginning to plan for something else instead of following what someone on the left or someone on the right wants, because the left and the right are only concerned about the left and the right.
Thank you all. We are going to move into our questions that you all have that you will talk through with each other. I do just want to note for the record that there has been some spirited advocacy for political parties. And I want to note for the record that NCEJN is a 501c3. And so while participants in the audience can advocate for who they want to, that is not the work of NCEJN. Just wanted to note that. Okay. The questions are before you. Do you believe we are heirs of the world's revolutions? If so, as heirs, what have we inherited? And what is our responsibility? What examples from past or current history help to anchor or elevate your vision? for liberation? And what is one way you will deepen your commitment to solidarity after leaving the summit? So please engage with any of these questions. We will give about 10 minutes before we wrap, and we will move on to close this section.